Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we're looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network.
I'm Pete Wright, or am I Stan Lee?
Today we are talking about Minute 73, which begins with Senator Brandt's speech and ends with Rogers briefing Carter and Phillips on the map of Hydro weapons factories. Back on the show, it's Jonathan and Tabitha Carlisle. Hello again, you two.
Hey, thanks for having us back.
I thought these episodes would be shorter.
All right, so we're back in the camp. This is very brief here. We're finishing up in the camp with everybody cheering. I don't know if we have anything else to say about that other than it's our final pullback. Otherwise, we'll just jump into Senator Brandt. Any last thoughts on the Howling Commandos and the camp?
No, but before we get to Senator Brandt, can I talk about something from the street view when we go through there?
Yes. Well, the street view is actually right after.
Is that right
Senator
after?
Brandt.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Sorry. Never mind.
No, that's okay. So, all right. Well, let's jump into Senator Brandt. So we cut to Senator Brandt, and this is a moment where he's got this little presentation, as we find out from the newspaper. Right after this, he's going to be presenting a medal for valor to his personal friend, Captain America. How does this play? Does it feel like a political moment for Brandt?
Oh, totally. Personal friend is a stretch.
Also, I mean, where are they? Where does this scene take place?
That is a good question.
It feels like in America, and why would he expect that Captain America is there? Because even if he was on tour, he's still in Europe, right?
Well, we haven't gotten to the deleted scene yet, but in the deleted scene, it would indicate that they were possibly in London, where they were giving away the medal.
Well, I mean, we can mention that for sure, because they do call out, Colonel Phillips will mention in that deleted scene that, you stood up the senator and several members of parliament. And
he hands them a box that appear to be the box that has his Medal of Valor in it that he had.
So this presentation is in England?
That's what I'm gathering.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
There's nothing to say that it's not. It just doesn't look, it doesn't have that Mexico filter on it or anything.
It looks like it's in DC.
No. It feels very stagey, the whole thing. It wasn't in the script, so I'm assuming that this was something that they added as a reshoot later in the process. And I don't know if it was just because they were like, well, we got to squeeze in our Stan Lee cameo somewhere. Where is that going to be? And it does kind of end up feeling like this whole thing was put in here just to get Stan Lee's cameo shot.
Mm-hmm.
They did shoot this in LA. It's shot on the southern side of the Huntington Art Gallery. And interestingly, this is also where they are close to where they shot the medal ceremony from Iron Man 2, also where Iron Man and War Machine fought the Hammer drones. So this is a location used a number of times in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, probably because in LA, locations like this are probably very film friendly and happy to be used for projects like this when Marvel's paying big checks. So, and I don't think they're going to fly Stan Lee over to London to film his part of the film.
Mm-hmm.
The strange thing about it, we'll get back to Senator Brandt in a minute, but the strange thing about it in Stan Lee's cameo is we've got this wide shot of this whole group of people watching Senator Brandt for this presentation, and you have a group of people on the left, and then when you cut to the two shot of Stan Lee and the person next to him, who we'll certainly talk about, he's credited as Soldier with General. When you cut to them, you can figure out where they're sitting in context of the group because of the people around them. But when you look at the wide shot, it is like in no way do the people match Stan Lee and the other person. It's so strange. It's like worse than the Oscar substitutes that you get when somebody's sitting in a chair for somebody. It's like more akin to the stunt doubles that you get in Spaceballs or something. Like it's strangely like two people who don't look anything like the Stan Lee and his partner that are sitting there. I don't know. It's so weird.
So I just have to say, two things as I'm scrolling back and forth on this. Number one, you're right. The substitution looks terrible in a Marvel Movie by Minute podcast. It looks terrible, and everybody takes shortcuts. But the fact that I think of the four of us, only one of us who is researching for a movie by minute podcast on this movie is the one who caught it, I think is very telling, because there is nothing in that swap. And I think, again, this goes back to the hand-wavy nature of movie making. It's Stan Lee, and I'm kind of looking for that Stan Lee cameo as an audience member, so I'm really only focused on what's the gimmick that they're going to do for Stan Lee. And once it hits, it's there, and I'm excited about it, and it's Stan Lee, and now it's got even more weight given, the loss of Stan Lee, and so I don't think had you not pointed it out, I don't think I ever would have caught it.
I agree.
My question then is like, okay, so we do have the people behind them. So did they actually shoot the wide shot with all the same people? I mean, it didn't have to be on the same day, but did they purposefully swap them out? Or was it a case where they got like a clean shot of all the people and Stan Lee and his partner are green screened in the front or something?
That's kind of what it looks like. I don't know, Andy.
That's it's entirely possible. I wouldn't be surprised if it was done separately and they just shot a plate of the people sitting here. And then, I mean, it doesn't even need to be like a green screen. It could have just been like a projection system where they had it playing behind them and then they just lit these two, because it does feel very much like they kind of are lit slightly differently than everybody else. I mean, it looks close enough to be matching and it doesn't really distract. But for the sort of thing they're trying to do for these Stan Lee cameos, it seems very much the sort of thing like, you're only going to have to be here for 20 minutes. We're just going to throw this general outfit on you. You're going to say your line a couple times and you're done. That probably is a lot easier because Stan Lee, an aging fellow by this point for sure, probably was happy to, minimize the time he had to commit to these. As fun as surely they were.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the cameo? In the scope of the Stan Lee cameos, do you like him being this general that pops up here?
I think it's funny because I know it's inserted and it doesn't really do much with the story, but I like that it is part of a scene that's happening. I like the whole thing that Captain America isn't there, that they thought he was going to be, that somebody else comes out, because then it's a Stan Lee cameo that you just don't see coming, because it seems like there's something happening with the movie. And then, boom, he's there. Oh, okay. We can forget about that scene. No big deal. Or, I mean, you don't forget that Stan Lee's there, but I mean, the scene doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, sure.
Right. It's just here. It's really only here for this, right? Like the only purpose. Is it weird that he thinks that Brandt's aide would have been like, are we meant to think like he really did think that that's Captain America?
He's sort of a daft general octogenarian.
I guess I do try to put my head in, like, what if I lived in this time or times earlier or whatever? Like, your world would be pretty small. Like, I know Captain America toured, but that doesn't mean every single person saw a picture of what he actually looks like. We don't have the internet with the Yahoo News in our face every day or whatever.
Yeah, right. And to that end, I suppose there's an element of that you can buy. It plays okay. And, again, it's really here just to get our cameo in.
Mm-hmm. But as far as his costume goes, he's got all the things. He's a master marksman, or I have some notes. But I started taking notes on the pins that he has, but then it just became apparent that they just put all the good stuff on there. And I was like, okay, I'm not gonna go through them all.
The best of all that he could be, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they say. You're going to be everything. We also get another cameo. Did either of you or any of you catch the other cameo in the scene? The person sitting next to Stan Lee?
Mm-mm.
No, I didn't.
Pete, surely you did.
It is a face that I absolutely know, and for the life of me, I cannot tell you who it is. Are you going to make me do the IMDb game?
No, I won't have to. It is Robert Brown, a.k.a. Reb Brown.
It's Reb Brown.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
The person who played Captain America in the TV movies back in the 70s.
Oh.
Amazing.
Well, that's good.
He looks great. I love when they do this, when they kind of honor kind of those older properties by just having the person in, like when Lou Ferrigno popped in to the various Hulk movies. I just think there's something cool about that they remember to do that.
Now I have to know who's taller, Chris or what was his name, Mr. Brown?
Reb Brown.
Okay. So who between the two of them, who's taller?
Well, let's see. We did Chris Evans, who was, I believe, was he 6 feet? Red Brown is 6'4".
Oh, so he's got a little smirk. He's like, yeah, he used to be taller.
Actually, he's 73 now. He's down to 6'3".
Ooh.
He's in that shrinking period.
that's rough.
of his life.
And Chris Evans is confirmed 6 feet.
Yeah. So Red Brown.
That's a funny joke, Stanley.
Yeah.
You made a funny joke. This is a bloomin' onion of all kinds of good humor and callbacks and honors of characters.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, Marvel.
You know, I don't think they did that with the Thor. What was the actor who played Thor in that Hulk TV movie? I don't think he ended up getting a cameo.
Getting anything?
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah. That's too bad. Nor did the 1990 Captain America. I don't think he's popped up in anything.
It's interesting.
Or the person who played Red Skull. But did the Red Skull rat pop up anywhere? If you guys haven't seen that Captain America, it's worth it for a laugh.
Yeah.
For a laugh.
For sure.
Most of them are.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right. So we get this this moment with the senator, and Captain America is not here. Brandt's aide comes out, and I believe, unless I'm misremembering, I believe this is a picture wrap on these two characters, because essentially this is a picture wrap on this part of Captain America's life.
Yeah.
Do either of you have any thoughts on Senator Brandt and kind of the way that his character has been used throughout the film? Did you like kind of this element of the story?
It was a fine element of the story. Senator Brandt, I don't know, he seems kind of weaselly, but I don't know that he actually is. You know, he just had a job to do. You know, I just wanted Captain America to be out there fighting and doing what he was super soldiered to do. And so,
But I did really enjoy the whole playfulness of having Captain America do it, and he's the character that basically got that to happen. So
yeah,
totally.
No, I totally understand. And story wise, that all makes sense. Movie wise, that all makes sense. Yeah.
But I guess we don't really see. I guess if Senator Brandt were to like mean anything to me, or like I'd be happy or sad to see him come or go. Like they don't really show anything like back home, you know, and like Senator Brandt is trying to pass this bill for like we don't see any of that. So
no.
He's not doing any like good politicking.
Sure.
I mean, like,
yeah,
we don't see fundraising or debating.
Yeah.
I mean, he certainly is a supporting character who to a certain extent feels like a character who didn't come from the comics. He's just somebody who's here just to kind of help the story. And, you know, I think that he's fine in context of what he's given here in the film. But at the same time, it's funny that when I returned to this after a number of years, I kind of had forgotten that he was a part of the movie until I watched it again. I'm like, oh, yeah, there's a whole senator element to the story. So,
yeah.
Okay, well, we're leaving the Stan Lee cameo bit, and we are coming to London. We get a brief shot, very CG with the blimps up in the sky. And we were really setting up location because we're moving down into the Allied headquarters underground. But let's talk about the exterior real quick. Tabitha, you had something you wanted to say about this little section here?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about those barrage balloons in the sky. In the sky, because I had thought that they were just a bunch of Zeppelins at first. I was like, why do they have so many Zeppelins in the sky? So I went searching, and they're actually barrage balloons. Can I talk about those for a minute?
Please
like
do.
What they were?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they could reach a height of 14,764 feet. And what they did was they would put wire cables on these and make a net around their tall buildings, especially in London during World War I and II, to keep enemy planes from coming in and bombing and destroying their buildings. So they would actually destroy, you know, a lot of planes, especially in World War I, a lot of planes were destroyed when they would fly into these wires, and it would cut their plane. And they weren't as effective in World War II against planes, but it was against the V1 flying bombs. And so what I had read was they destroyed 231 V1 flying bombs were destroyed in World War II from flying into those nets. And London had a connection, that whole mesh wire system. They had a 50-mile net made of those barrage balloons in 1918. around London.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool. And then after the war, after World War II, they had during the war when
this is my favorite part, I think.
When these were as effective, I'm not sure which part I'm about to tell. When these were as effective, they like sent the balloons like over Germany, and they were like setting the woods on fire and stuff like that. They were sending them that way to be destructive in other ways. What did I tell you that you like? Part that
I mean, it was part of that. Not that I'm thrilled about forests being set on fire, but I mean, but they would send the barrage balloons with basically they would just like cut the cables and let them go. So like they would still have cables hanging from them because they weren't part of the net anymore. So they would the cables would hit the electrical lines and destroy their electrical grid and stuff like that. Like, that's very destructive and all that, but at least
easy multi-purpose
when they were done, they were just like, just send them over to see what happens,
Yeah.
Just do whatever we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
So that's what those were.
It's interesting because they're so uncontrollable in that sense. So it's interesting that they were doing that because it's like once you kind of let them go, you're really relying on the wind to kind of take it from there.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that they were doing that. But they're fascinating elements that were used in the war. And I didn't know that either. So it's cool that we get that little glimpse here. Yeah.
Yeah. In World War II, they weren't quite as effective because they had fitted the German planes, they had fitted wire cutters on the front of their planes so they could cut through the wires, and their planes were able to go to a higher altitude to be able to bomb from above. They didn't have to be as low, but I thought those wire cutters on the front of the planes were interesting also.
And when she told me that, I was like, where have I seen that before? I was like, oh yeah, in Batman when he takes the Joker's balloons away. But
oh my God. Tim Burton's Batman. Yeah. Oh my God. That's a throwback. Yeah. Parade.
So
that is so funny.
Oh, that's really funny.
Barrage balloons. So.
Well, and it makes sense here because this, where this location is, this is King Charles Street, which is right in the heart of the government buildings here. You can see Big Ben across the way. And so this is very much like the center of all of the stuff. And you can see why they would have these barrage balloons located above all of this section. So it absolutely makes sense. And of course, we get to see the newspaper, the Daily Mail, and on it, Captain America to receive Medal for Valor. And that's in the script, that was all we got out of the medal. Again, that whole scene was added likely just to get the cameo in there. And it takes us underground. We go down into the Allied headquarters that are right here under the London government buildings, and very much designed to look like the real headquarters buildings that you would see, various the military officials from London at the time working. And so it feels very real to kind of have it looking this way. So how does this kind of transition play for you? Do you like this journey into the heart of London as we kind of shift the story?
I like that. I think it's pretty cool. It's kind of a throwback to earlier on, when they went into the little antique store or whatever that was, and stuff, and they went down the elevator, and, it was all hidden. So, it just kind of is that thing again, like here's another hidden room, underneath. I liked it.
I will share my embarrassment and say that when I first started watching this scene, like intently to take notes and stuff, I was like, where are we? And then when I started paying attention to all the little, like Big Ben, there's the Union Jack, there's the barrage balloons, there's a double-decker bus. I'm like, well, how did I not get that from the first? I don't know. But I think I was looking at the Daily Mail, like looking for some kind of like locational. They don't print it out for us like they do in a lot of movies, like London, England. It's like, oh, okay, now I know. But they put all the clues in there, and I was still like, where are we?
Well, what I love about the Daily Mail is that it's printed that Captain America is getting his Medal of Valor, right? But the reputation of the Daily Mail it's a right wing like rag right now today. It's a right wing rag that prints like just it's a gossip rag essentially. It's doesn't have a very good reputation, and so there's something really funny about it to me that where the Daily Mail is the publication and not like the London Times, right? That or something with a bit more of a reputation. And maybe that's to put us in a particular part of town. Maybe that's something to sort of locate us in kind of a different part of London. I don't know, but I do think it's funny that there might have been people walking the street, seeing the Daily Mail print this and saying, "Ugh, rubbish." Right? That's more lies from the press. Like, there's something funny about that to me.
Well, maybe it's because it's related to America. They're like, just put that in the Mail. None of the serious newspapers are going to pick up on a story about Captain America.
Do you know, that's a really good point. I think you're saying it as a joke, but I think that could very well be it, right? Like, this is the kind of headline that would never make it in the Times.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually,
interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I hadn't really meant it seriously, but yeah, I guess I'll take that one. Yeah. I'm just reading right now. It looks like that there was a British historian who wrote that newspapers like the Daily Express and Daily Mail were out of touch, not only with British public opinion, but also with British government policy in regards to the Danzig crisis. So a specific call out there. But yeah, so maybe even then people were looking at it like, yeah.
And today, guess what? It is being criticized heavily for printing sensationalist and inaccurate scare stories of science and medical research, as well as plagiarism and copyright infringement. So, doing great, Daily Mail, no notes.
All right. Well, we have this newspaper headline, and that takes us down into this cabinet war room where we are here. This is this payoff, I guess. I don't know. This is a debate. In the comics, it's kind of alluded to that Captain America's, all of his abilities are stronger, but it's not really, called out specifically like, a Superman sort of thing. How do you two read this? Like, he saw this map when he was in Zola's experiment room, and here he is marking everything down, the Hydra weapons factories that he had seen on this map. Are these newfound photographic memory powers? How do you two read Steve's ability to kind of pull all this stuff to draw it on this map?
Even if you got into the argument of like he's not super, or like what do people know about him and his superpowers and stuff, like I would totally just take that from just him being Steve Rogers and just having, as a little guy, having to overcompensate to survive in the world, to be smart or to remember things and to put pieces together, so that he can make his way. Like, I mean, yeah, we know he can do it all day, but maybe also there's times when he avoids certain things. He takes a certain route because he knows that these guys are over here at 4:00 in the afternoon, or whatever. He doesn't necessarily go looking for it. So I totally buy this, that he doesn't even need superpowers to be just focused and pay attention and to remember the things that are important,
Yeah, to be that.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I really like that take on it, because it's something that we haven't really talked about, which is that he already was made of the stuff to be a great soldier. He just didn't have the bod.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the super soldier serum might have improved some things, but really he was already an astute agent of good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like it. I like it a lot.
I'm just waiting for that comic book to come out, The Agents of Good.
Astute Agents of Good.
Astute Agents of Good.
Well, that will be covered thoroughly in our documentary, Boots on the Ground.
Oh, dear.
I cannot wait.
The Agents of Good, a significant role.
Well, one thing with Steve is, he certainly seems to be developing his humble brag. That seems to be kind of an element of him here. How does it? Is he flirting? Is it just kind of this humble brag? Is he really just trying to like give Peggy more reasons to fall for him? How does it play for you, this moment between the two of them?
It definitely comes off as a humble brag.
Yeah.
He didn't really have to say anything, but I'm sure he still doesn't really know how to flirt well. And so he just doesn't know. He's still just, but that's kind of good, that they, in talking about the parts of Steve, is that even, he's not, just because he's Captain America, he's not like this ladies' man yet. He's still got some awkwardness. He's still got some social awkwardness and awkwardness with Peggy. That's good. It makes him more human. But definitely seems like a humble brag.
I'm going to go even further down the road of him being like, a smart guy or like, just paying attention to things. And like that, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how he was as Steve Rogers when he was younger. I wouldn't be surprised if he got beat up for being like the smart guy who ruins the curve, for good grades or whatever,
Yeah.
And so now he's like, doing something smart. And then everybody's just looking at him. He's like, oh, well, I'm like you guys. It's fine,
Just trying to downplay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
It's interesting how we kind of get this moment here, and I feel like there's a little bit of all of that here, and I'm always curious in this film more than any other Captain America film. Like, I mean, he hasn't been Big Steve for that long. I mean, at this point in the film, it's been since late June or early July. I can't remember now. And we're at, according to the wiki, November 5th. So it's been, not quite half a year. And I mean, certainly he's been fighting, he's been doing stuff, but he spent a lot of his time in the USO show and hasn't really been in a situation where he was like this hero. And so I can't help but feel like a lot of the things that come from him throughout, kind of especially up to this point in the film, before we really get into constant military and now he's Captain America, like I feel like a lot of it is little Steve, the puny Steve, still trying to get a sense of who this big guy is and who he, the sorts of things that he can do and just, how people react to him now, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we don't see a pile of pencils on the side of, like, yeah, he remembers where all these things are, but he keeps breaking the pencils because he's like, oh, shoot. I don't know.
We were laughing at an earlier minute, like he keeps running into door frames because it's like, I'm not used to being this tall. One of the things that he mentions is the Maginot Line, and that was something that I had looked up because I wasn't that familiar with this. Is this something any of you had heard of before this movie?
It's the border between France and Germany, right? It was like didn't they put a lot of guns on the Maginot Line? Wasn't that like the defensive border? I might be totally making this up. Is that a thing?
You're not totally making it up, no. So they created structures and cement structures named after a guy that Maginot, but I don't remember what his first name was. I didn't look it up that intently. But no, I hadn't known it as something to actually look it up. I didn't even know how to spell it. So Google helped me out with that. Yeah,
it is the Maginot Line, and it is basically the border of France. It was named after the French Minister of War, André Maginot, and it's a line of concrete fortifications, obstacles, and weapon installations built by France in the 30s to stop Germany invading. And so it's essentially like their own Great Wall, but it really never quite, made it the entire border. It's just spotty kind of here and there. And really it was just designed to be, a fortification of some sort. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's, an interesting little thing. And I like that there are these moments like this, like the barrage balloons, things that we're getting in this movie that really do kind of place this very much in kind of the real world, even though so much of this obviously is fabricated for this fictional Marvel version of World War II. Mm-hmm. And then that kind of takes us, let's talk about the extended scene here before we get to the map, because we have this moment where as they turn around, we have an unnamed extra take the map away, and he and Peggy have this little flirty moment. They turn around to walk out into the main room here, and they're stopped by Howard, who pops in, and then Colonel Phillips. This is a moment where Howard has this little chat with him about, hey, aren't you supposed to be picking up a medal right now? And then Colonel Phillips comes in. We'd kind of talked about this a little bit because Colonel Phillips says, you just embarrassed a senior senator in front of dozens of reporters and 10 members of parliament. He gives Steve the medal and he says, you should get a medal just for that. And then they talk about the Hydra cartridge and trying to figure out what it is. Colonel Phillips asks Howard if he has figured out what it is. Howard says, if you believe Rogers, it's apparently the most powerful explosive known to man. This is kind of starting an interesting, tension? I'm not sure what they're going for here between Steve and Howard. Is Howard jealous because Steve seems so smart and dashing and he feels threatened? I'm not exactly sure. But Howard says, either you're wrong or Schmidt's damn near rewritten the laws of physics. Okay, let's talk about this scene, how it plays, if we think we needed it, what it's giving to us. I mean, how did it work for you?
I don't think we need it. I think it was an okay scene to cut, because it really didn't give much to me. And it is kind of confusing I don't know, it's kind of weird with Stark being kind of jealous of him or something, because that's not the feeling we get, later on. But if it wasn't, I don't know if it would be so much threatened by Cap's size and handsomeness, but by his intellect. I think Stark would be more threatened by someone that seemed smarter than him, or had more intelligence, I guess.
I don't see how that's a threat to Stark, though. Like, just that a soldier goes, that thing blowed up good.
That's true.
And he's like, oh, I'm threatened. My intelligence is threatened by that.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, then it's weird for him to be like that.
Yeah.
I
think I'd like it better if we saw, I think in my mind's eye, I can manufacture it. But I think if we saw on camera a little more twinkle in Stark's eye, like, rewriting the laws of physics, and then like, oh, what could I do with that?
Yeah.
I agree with that. I actually like the scene, and this is the first time I think I've watched a deleted scene and thought, I don't know necessarily why they cut it, because I think it's an interesting exchange having all of these people together in that little conversation space, but it's performatively questionable, because I think that setting up that, like Stark setting up that weird sort of presentation of like preening or peacocking in front of Steve is not useful. I think you could do the same scene, but have them feel like they're on the same team, and it would be a great scene. It would be a great scene that would totally set up the research sequence that's yet to come next week.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's an element here that I don't know what they're trying to do. I kind of do like the Hydra cartridge. Again, I struggle with the fact that that's the only thing that Stark is studying. Like, why isn't he also holding one of the, like, arnimulation guns? Something else to say, I'm studying this and this, because all of this is using this Tesseract power, and I want to see what it's doing. But the only thing that he seems to even acknowledge is that Steve brought this Hydra cartridge back. And that to me is the thing that I end up being glad that they cut it, because if it was here, it would have only been saying, we're not paying attention to any of that other stuff. Just this one little thing that you happen to grab, because it's you, and it just plays weird to me.
Well, I think that's a good point, Andy, and I think it's probably fine to do that, but I do stand by the fact that Cap took this artifact from the warehouse, and we don't see that artifact again until next week when he's doing research on it. And I like the fact that this is a beat that says, here's a thing, and it's familiar to us as an audience that we've seen this before, and now it's been handed off to Stark, and we're going to go back to the lab later. Like, that just makes sense to me to have that connective tissue. So I'm an island, but I miss it.
Well, because the connective tissue would have been next week. Like, we're going to have that. Like, now we know that Stark has it and is studying it. Like, I don't feel like
I don't know that you know this, Andy. That's a week from now. It's a week from now. I have to wait.
Yeah, I don't think we understand.
That's like 3 hours of podcast conversation before I get to talk about that.
I'd say I don't know if we know what next week is. I think we cease to exist after a few episodes here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry for you, but that's true. This is over and poof, it's the snap.
Just like you've been blasted with an arnimulation gun.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm threatened that you know that.
All right, so we have this little scene here, however you're going to read it. And then it really, it's funny. It cuts to this map that we're now looking at out in the middle of the room. The only thing that really gives us a hint that this scene was cut is when we cut to this scene to have this conversation out in the room when we're out in front of the map. It's that now suddenly we have Colonel Phillips right here with them as they're talking about it. And so that's really kind of the only thing that gives any of that away, is that suddenly he's there. Like, he just walked in real quick.
Yeah.
But what we do see here, we see this huge map that they have in the middle of the room, and we see 5 factories on it at this point. From what I could tell, one is near Luckenwald, which is south of Berlin. One is in South Prague, in what would have been Czechoslovakia at the time. One is north of Nuremberg. One is in southern Austria, which would have been what Steve had just raided. So it's interesting that they still have a flag on that one. And then one in northern Italy. So that's what we see. On the map that Steve had seen in Zola's room, now maybe these just hadn't been transferred yet from the map that he just marked, only 2 of those were actually here on this one. So I guess at some point they'll add more here. And clearly Hydra's going to be, there are a lot more, because Steve's got a lot of raiding to do in his montage that's coming up. So there will be plenty of time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does this work okay for you? Does this just feel like we're setting up? Like, does it feel like a setup scene? I guess we're getting a sense of all of these factories out there. What are we going to do about it? Like, how do you read into this scene?
I get it. We've been watching the movie. We know who Captain America is. We know who Steve Rogers is. We know who he's capable of to some degree. And now everybody seems on board. But even then, I'm kind of distracted how much freedom he seems to have to run the room. Like, you would still think there'd be like, okay, what do you know? That is valuable. Okay, here's what we're doing. I'm just surprised just from watching movies with military stuff and the tropes that they use that he has so much freedom that he seems to have.
Yeah.
Or not freedom, but, authority.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It is odd. I don't know if I have anything else to say, but it is odd.
That's fine. He's Captain America. So that's fine.
He is Captain America.
I know. And the other part of me is just like, yeah, but he's Captain America.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that struck me is like, I mean, I don't know. It's really is a point of contention about how much control Hydra has at this point in the war, when they've essentially also kind of cut ties with the Nazis, with the Nazi Party. I mean, they had been a division, kind of a science division of the Nazis. But then we saw when he killed the 3 SS officers that came to visit, which was months ago, that was essentially him saying, no, we're fighting the Nazis too. And then you see this map and, through the montage, like it seems like they have Hydra factories everywhere. And I don't know if this is just the, cut one head off, 2 more sprout sort of thing where they just kind of keep popping up and it's just a surprise to everybody that they're so robust. But does it seem like, I mean, I don't know. How does it play like weird that Hydra is so spread at this point? Like, or do you buy that this is this secret organization that had separated ties from the Nazis, but is everywhere?
Well, yeah, that like with every montage we get, 25 new factories to raid. Like that's kind of what it feels like. Like we get this acceleration of time from our perspective on behalf of the commandos and of Captain America and of the U.S. Allied military operation. But what we're not seeing is the Hydra montage, and that they're also growing, right? They're also doing their stuff. All we get is like eventually we'll get Schmidt pulling up to rubble. We don't get to see the growth part.
I assume that will be covered in the Boots on the Ground documentary.
Well, because it's important to have that perspective for a balanced approach. In order to understand Hydra's untold story of loss in Switzerland, you have to show how they grow, Andy.
And Schmidt could have had like some, he had at his factories. He seemed to kind of be like under the radar a little bit, planning things and that, Hitler wasn't aware of. So in some of his other factories throughout, everything could have been kind of brewing just a little low key until he like activated his sleeper cells or whatever and kind of took over.
Well, he did actively kill Nazis, though, like earlier in the movie. Like he did disintegrate them with the Zolinator or whatever it was. Like I feel like that might have been a red flag for Hitler, which is actually the sequel to Boots on the Ground. It's called Red Flag for Hitler.
That one's a musical, though.
I mean, that is a good point, though. Like, to the extent that he was working for Hitler, but also trying to basically usurp Hitler and kind of take over the world as only mad supervillain can do. The fact that perhaps the factory that the SS officers visited is just like maybe the only place or one of the few places that the Nazis know exists as far as where Hydra is stationed. And he has been slowly building all of these other operations around Europe as a way to kind of keep, to the whole Hydra motto, cut one head off, 2 more sprout up. Like he's constantly trying to keep these other heads ready to burst out so that he always has a place to work. And to that end, I can see it. And I can see like that forethought as far as what Schmidt is trying to achieve here, that he needs to be ready to always have another place ready to go.
Okay, so where we are in the movie, I was not prepared to go here at all. But are we supposed to believe that is Red Skull in charge of Hydra, or is he just one of the heads?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I feel like it's, well, I don't know. I read it that it sets it up like he is the head of Hydra. But I don't know if that's just because the movie kind of feels that way. Hydra obviously is something that does manage to keep going after the fact. So I don't know. How do you all read it?
We've watched most. I think we still have a little bit of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to finish, but we've watched most of it. And that seems to muddy the waters a little bit as like the origin of Hydra and, what it is, where it is, if there's some kind of actual power behind it, besides just Red Skull finding this cube or if it started with the Nazis, or I don't know.
Well, I mean, it seemed to, I don't know if it started with the Nazis, but it certainly seemed to be kind of what they had as their, scientific research division, their own version of SSR that they could kind of funnel money into building crazy new weaponry. But to that end, it does seem like Schmidt is heading that up, at least as far as Hitler is concerned. But once you step away from kind of how they're tied into the Nazis, that's a good question. Like, did Schmidt have his own head of people that he was also then kind of answering to, not in the scientific reserve studies way that he's doing to Hitler, but just in the scope of what Hydra's trying to accomplish?
Well, there is also this perspective. Like, my memory of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is shaky right now. It's been a long time, but like, could it not be fashioned that Red Skull is sort of the originator of this part of Hydra? Or am I mistaking there's some older Hydra pre-Nazis?
I don't know. My memory is also kind of shaky because I thought that at one point there was some kind of storyline that kind of seemed like maybe there was some cosmic power, like not the cube, but some cosmic intelligence behind it, I guess.
That might have been with the Darkhold stuff.
Well, because I know in season 7 there is this time they do the time travel story in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which monkeys around a lot of stuff because it goes back to the 30s. And so there is pre-Red Skull Hydra, but he could have been part of it, right? Like, he could have been part of that head. So I guess I'm just looking at, we see a lot of villains between the 1930s and, Alexander Pierce, Robert Redford, who had Hydra. So it just feels like he is a principal originator of the modern Hydra.
Sure.
Maybe of the modern Hydra. Yeah, I mean, just looking in the wiki, I mean, it did start with Hive, the cult that it was kind of that cult group Hive that who was a powerful inhuman exiled to the planet Mavath by ancient Inhumans. Ever since his banishment, the cult had been determined to bring him back to Earth to commence a planetary takeover, and then it evolved, took many forms. And then what it says is its most recent incarnation coming into existence shortly after the rise of Nazism in Germany under the leadership of Schmidt as the scientific branch of the SS. And that's when it took on the name Hydra. And so I don't know. I'll have to do some more digging into that to kind of have more conversations about the further development and what happens when Schmidt gets killed.
Okay, so we'll stop here and then... We'll come back to it.
We'll come back
to it after you guys do the Inhumans minute, and then we'll come back.
Yeah. There's something about it, though, as a fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that just wants to uncover that really Powers Booth is timeless, and he was the head of Hydra from, Babylon to today. We just didn't know it. Mm-hmm. It's Powers Booth.
It's always Powers Booth.
It's always Powers Booth.
Yeah.
The apocalypse of the Marvel Universe.
All right. Well, I don't know if we have anything else for this minute, so I think we can safely say let's wrap it up, and we'll come back next time to talk about the next minute. So why don't you two remind everybody where they can tune in to your other shows?
Well, we have no plans to do the Inhumans minute, so I guess you.
So that's
everybody's
still open?
Lost. Yes, it's still open. Yes, theprincessbrideminute.com. If you want a full podcast that you can get the beginning, middle, and end, go to that one. Don't go to my other one.
Inconceivable.
Awesome. Well, we will be right back. Thank you both so much for joining us here on the show. We certainly appreciate it. And we'll be back tomorrow to talk about minute 74. So thank you so much, Pete, as always.
Maybe I'm the leader of Hydra.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.